Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have a fantastic and incredible day on this fake holiday we have. As you guys all know, we always work on Martin Luther King Day, no matter what. We even work on Juneteenth, even though last year people accused me of not working on Juneteenth because I was supposed to have an article up on that day, and then AmCon chose to wait on it. But I still was writing and doing other work on Juneteenth, so we do not take those days off because we do not acknowledge them as holidays. So I am working hard for your guys' interest today, so hopefully you enjoy. So today we're going to jump right into our first topic from Cognitive Elite, and it's about Greenland. Nitro sent in a question about the Greenland Crisis. I was going to have today, the main topic is about conservative campus culture, because there was a fantastic article from New York Magazine that examines everything going on with Turning Point USA, college Republicans, how they interact with general Greek life on Southern universities, and a lot of other things, and everything going on in the wake of Charlie Kirk and their influences. But Greenland is the news topic. There's more to say, even despite even more than what I said last week in both podcasts and in my article about Greenland, as Trump decided to announce tariffs on Europe, and Europeans are obviously not taking that well. So we're going to talk about Greenland Crisis, what it means for America, whether it's necessary, and go off on this topic. And then I didn't get any questions about the Conservative Campus Revolution article, but I'll discuss that next. But it'll be a brief discussion. I might work something out of it into an article at the end of the week. But we'll go into what's going on with Greenland. So if you guys know, he decided to impose tariffs on Europe because Europe is dragging its feet. It's not willing to give Greenland to Trump. And he just decided to go with it. And obviously, Europeans are pissed about it. Now, I have a person who thinks we should get Greenland. I wrote an article last week about this. I think it's inevitable because the Greenlanders are eventually going to have a referendum and announce independence. The vast majority of Greenlanders want it. The only reason they haven't is because they like Danish subsidies that are in Danish welfare state. But if they're ever given the choice, if Denmark ever has any reforms to the welfare system, or if Denmark, and a lot of things going on with Europe, it's very tough for Europeans to continue to maintain the welfare state that they've maintained since post-World War II, since the end of World War II, and they're having difficulties with that. And their economies are stagnant, so it's not clear that they're going to be having these subsidies for an end of time. And it's inevitable. Most experts agree that Greenland's going to declare independence. Now, when it does, it's going to fall in the hands of one of the world's superpowers. China is already trying to get a hand in Greenland. It has a lot of projects there. There's a hilarious moment where somebody in my replies last week to my article said, "Oh, there's no Chinese designs on it. In 2018, when they tried to have projects there, the American Empire denied it." It's like, yeah, they have no designs on it. They're just trying to get projects there. And they still have projects there, and despite our opposition to what they're doing. And let's say they declare independence. And it's a situation where we've been blocked out of because Europe decided to have a hands-off Greenland, leave Greenland alone, and then the Chinese come and swoop in, promise welfare state, and then they vote to have some type of strong relationship with China as an independent state. That would be absolutely against our interests. And Greenland is within our sphere of influence. This is not, Greenland is not part of Europe. You can say that about Iceland. You can say that about a lot of other places in Europe. It is not part of Europe. It is closer to us than it is to Europe. And they're not even utilizing it properly. In Greenland, Denmark is putting very little investment there. They're not the ones capable of defending it. We have to have bases there to defend it and to maintain it. And so we're just about, getting rid of the pretense in that. And my solution is not outright acquisition because I don't think that's going to go well on the world stage. Greenlanders don't want to be an outright American territory. A lot of it is because we don't have the generous welfare state of Denmark and Europeans. Also, they have idiotic notions about what Americans like. They interviewed I like a whaler or somebody who was like involved in hunting the Arctic species they have there, or polar species they have there, and he's like, the Americans, they love these seals. They're not going to allow me to hunt anymore. And I think we would allow him to hunt, probably more so than Denmark, but. They don't want to be a part of America. They don't want to be in American territory, which is what Trump wants. So there is a good solution to this, where they declare independence and we offer them a compact of free association, which we have with Marshall Islands and some other places, where they're nominally independent. We give them a lot of subsidies, economic subsidies, and there's only 57,000 people. There's over 50,000 people there. There's not that many people there, so it's pretty cheap. This is not Puerto Rico. It has a tiny fraction of Puerto Rico's population. What we get out of Greenland would be far more worth than what we're putting into it, and those types of subsidies. So we have that, and then we have direct military and economic assistance, and we're able to do what we want in the territory while it gets to claim it's sovereign and independent, and everyone's happy. And we can even set up like their own welfare system for them. Even if we did bring them in and they want a welfare system, we could put them on something like the Indian reservation system that they have. It's essentially full welfare. They can be an Indian reservation, and they are native people. I don't know if that would go over well in America, because then they'd be like, well, why are they getting universal health care and we're not? We need to have this for all Americans. So that could create problems there. But I think a COFA is the best way to go about it. But that's not what Trump wants. Trump wants outright, he wants it part of America. And this is the thing about Trump. Like, there's a lot of great arguments for why America should have Greenland, or why we should change our relationship with Greenland. But Trump wants Greenland part of America. He thinks it's part of his legacy, thinks it's like this big, beautiful territory that they can do stuff in, and he just wants it a part of America. He just, wants it. That's his thing, and it's gotten into his head that he wants Greenland. And the Europeans are realizing, like, oh shit, we can't do anything, because really what the Europeans are wanting, first off, they're pissing him off on how they're going about this. The only reason that we have this crisis is that they all overreacted towards the Katie Miller meme, where she had Greenland covered in an American flag, which I used in my article last week. And then they all decided to have this response where it's like, Mr. Trump, please report to the principal's office, and the principal's office, the EU, and we need to give you a lecture. And so, the Europeans have still not figured out the massive power imbalance they have between America. They think that they're more powerful than us. They think that they can lecture us and wag their finger and tell us what to do. They are the principal, and we're the troublesome student. That's how they treat us. It's a very condescending attitude that they have towards us, and they express that in the reaction to Katie Miller tweet, and keep doing all these other provocations. They have us insulting lines to Trump, saying you're free to invest. You can already do these things. Why mess up a good deal? These kind of, once again, condescending. They're sending troops there, which they're not going to be capable of defending the territory, and so it just acts as a provocation towards Trump. It just pisses him off. So, and the reactions of Europeans online and elsewhere, that Europe would kick America's ass, that this is going to be this could be even Vietnam, but worse. I don't know how that's going to do things. They're sharing memes of armed walruses and polar bears as like, this is what American empire has to go up against. And, they're just completely delusional and off the charts insulting towards us. And there's like this power imbalance. It's like anything Trump does, they have like, please report to the principal's office so we can lecture you. And that's obviously not going to please Trump, when we are the powerful party here. They are not the principal. We're the principal in a lot of ways, and they're just the students that we subsidize. So they don't recognize this. So this meme could have otherwise been ignored, but Europeans were already upset about the Venezuela move. But in their way about the Venezuela move is like, we're reviewing how this works with international law. It's like, it's a done fact. Like, it's a complete fact. Like, there's nothing you can do. But they still wanted to pretend that it was that. So they provoked this in a lot of ways by the overreaction to Trump's Katie Miller thing. Trump, high off the Venezuela raid, decided like, hey, I also want Greenland. And now he's like fixated on that, and we're in the situation we have right now. I think we could still strong arm them for something. I think the best thing is just to force the Denmark to have a referendum in Greenland, and then us promise the Greenlanders like, hey, whatever benefits you're getting from Denmark, a COFA would be much better for you, and you'd have full independence, unlike being with Denmark. And I think we get enough Greenlanders, spreading money around. They'd agree to this. COFA happens. Europe saves face because they're like, well, this is an outright acquisition. The Greenlanders voted for this, fair and square. We have to respect that. It's still, America still allows Denmark to do Europe to do projects there. It's not exclusively American, but we have more control over it, and we're more capable of doing what we want there, and it's more fully secure in the American empire. I think that would have worked, but I don't think anyone's going to do that because essentially the Europeans don't want to give anything. And even what Europeans are doing is a delaying tactic. And it's a very obvious delaying tactic. They're like, we're going to set up a group to discuss this. And really their whole goal is to delay this until the midterms, which they expect the Democrats to win the House. Probably will. And there's no way in hell they're ever going to get the approval. Congress is going to approve the funding to get to obtain Greenland. And this would stop Trump's pursuit of it. Which would happen is that, and all these people making this point, like, oh, well, you could just use the money from tariffs. Like, no, he has to have congressional approval for territorial purchase. This is how it always works. He's bound by law and the Constitution. He has to get congressional approval of this. We had to get congressional approval for the funding for the Louisiana purchase and the purchase of Alaska. We're going to have to do the same here if we purchase it from them. And with the high cost of what it would cost to get Greenland, it's going to create a controversy and a storm. And I'm not even sure a Republican majority Congress would approve of it. But a Democratic majority House is absolutely not going to approve of this. And Europeans know this, so they're trying to delay. And Trump just wants outright acquisition. But I think if they just went and said, put on a referendum, have it this year, and COFA, it has to be congressionally approved, but I think Congress would approve that much more than an outright purchase. It would be a much lower cost. There's not the issues around annexation and stuff, even though it's still maybe not coming off as well. But it'll work out. This here, it's not going to work out. Even if we get Greenland, we are permanently pissing off the Europeans, which some people are like, well, they're not our allies. It's like, well, who the fuck are our allies then? India? Like, who else are our allies in the world if it's not Europe? They're very annoying. They're obnoxious. They do need to realize their place. But at the same time, like, who else are our allies in the world? India. It's like literally you're just like saying India, not Nigeria, because we're ripping up that agreement. Japan, maybe? South Korea? I mean, like, who's a part of our alliance? And if you're pushing, the thing is like, Europeans, this whole thing, the way we're going about it, like, I support getting Greenland. I don't think Trump's going about it the best way, but Trump is going about it in the way he sees fit, is that because he wants outright annexation. He doesn't want the COFA. And so he feels that this is the best way. But Europeans and a lot of the rest of the world, not just Europeans, are seeing that as America is not worthwhile of making deals with, of making agreements with, because we just got in July, 6 months ago, we wrung incredibly painful concessions from Europeans in their trade deal. That trade deal was humiliating for Europe. It was a complete and total lopsided win for Trump and America. They agreed to all these tariffs and stipulations of that trade deal that overwhelmingly favored America. And Europeans felt this was like a humiliation and very painful. And then and this is another reason why Trump's going so hard on Greenland, is that the Europeans made all this belligerent and obnoxious rhetoric over the tariffs. And like, we're going to go to a trade war. We're going to make America, we're going to punish America. When they realized that they couldn't punish America and they're going to screw over their own countries, that there's a lopsided power arrangement here, they immediately caved and gave everything Trump wanted. The problem is that we just got this incredible agreement between us and Europeans that overwhelmingly favored America, that was a huge win for Trump's trade agenda, and we just ripped it up. And you don't rip up agreements after just making them. It's very important. Anything in life, you just don't do that. Everyone knows that. If you make a promise, if you make agreement, especially an agreement and promise that overwhelmingly benefits you, that is entirely in your favor, you are an idiot to rip it up. Is that nobody is going to make agreements with us now if we realize we're this cavalier with our agreements. And that's the main reason I don't like the tariff way, is that it invalidates this win for Trump and this agreement we have. And on the international stage, you have to uphold your promises. These stupid things like we shouldn't uphold our promises, like if you're completely untrustworthy, whether in personal affairs or in geopolitical affairs, no one's going to work with you, and you're going to be a problem, and you're going to be isolated. And this is what happens: is like, always respect your agreements. Now, that doesn't mean a lot of Europeans are like, you're violating the 1951 agreement. First off, that 71 or whatever, it's from the 1950s. It's like 75 years old. It wasn't negotiated by Trump. The situation is completely different now than it was in the early 50s. That you can renegotiate deals like that. Anything long lasting or somebody else made, there's open for it. It is still even problematic when, a president makes a deal like what they did with Iran and then Trump rips it up. But that's the nature of American democracy. We've done that a lot in the past. But you can renegotiate deals. But it's very stupid to renegotiate deals you just made that overwhelmingly benefited you. And the world situation is the exact same that it was 6 months ago, pretty much. And then you just rip it up because you want Greenland. And I think even the cost of getting Greenland is if we with our current tactics get Greenland, we are going to push Europe to China. They're just going to think that China is a much better partner. They're much more trustworthy. And that's going to present problems for us long term if we just push them to China. And a lot of people are like, well, they would have bad things with China. It's like, China is not going to be as schizophrenic as we are. Like, they have a set policy. They go with it. It might be onerous. There's a lot of troubles with working with China, is that they come to collect, but they don't interfere with their personal, with their, internal affairs. They're not going to care about European censorship, which is a bad thing. They're not going to give a shit about, they're not going to have real designs on, they're not going to try to do outright annexation in Europe either, like we are. And they're all just going to become lackeys of the Chinese empire even if we get Greenland. And it's probably not worth the price of how it's going about it. It's why you have to do things that allow Europeans to save face on this and doesn't humiliate them. Is that even though it is necessary to recognize the power imbalance between America and Europe, and when they get really uppity, to remind them of this and to say this is like rather stupid and annoying, to remember that power imbalance, but we should not abuse them. But right now we are abusing and humiliating them. And the tariffs are like the final straw that it's going to stiffen resistance to them doing anything on Greenland, especially when they realize that they just have to hold out till the November midterms. And they know that Trump is not going to acquire Greenland. And I think that's what most likely they're going to do, is that they're just going to hold out. And I think this stiffens resistance. And I think the tariffs make it less possible to get Greenland. And even if we do, it's going to come at a huge price for it. Now, maybe it's for the best that NATO ends. That's truly something I'm on both sides with. Maybe it doesn't make as much sense now for NATO. And even what the president's agenda, new foreign policy, is seeing that we're going to not emphasize NATO as much. But it's not really good if Europe then has, their own security group, and then it's working closely with China. That's not in our American interest, and I don't know who our allies are in that case. We also pissed off East Asia over the trade war, over Trump's trade wars too, and they're a lot more skittish about working with us as well. I don't want to sound like a liberal here, but it's, there's a necessary to have a more realist America First agenda. And I think getting Greenland is part of that. I think the operations that we're doing in Venezuela and calls for that to do in Latin America are necessary. And I think it's also warranted to tell these, horrible Eurocrats to go fuck themselves and to realize that, hey, we're the boss, not you. But you shouldn't drive them into the arms of China here, which I worry about. The thing is, it's like, you say this is reasonable, and then you see Europeans. I almost completely changed my opinion on the tariffs. That's saying, oh, it's a bad idea. This is irrational. And then I saw the incident at an NBA game in London. Of course, it's an NBA game in London. All these Europeans are like, we're going to separate ourselves from America. The one thing that might not separate themselves from America is they're more loyal to American cultural imperialism than maybe even Americans are. Like, they're loving NFL games there and all the things. I didn't even know we were having NBA games in London. And they're singing the national anthem there. And then some guys are like, leave Greenland alone. And then they're like, yeah. And they all roar in approval during our national anthem. And it's a major insult. First off, it's gay. Second, cringe. And it's a major insult to us. And then I'm watching that clip. It's like, fuck yourselves. You deserve the tariffs. But, and then I get reasonable in the morning. I sober off, I calm down. I'm like, yeah, this isn't really good. So I fully support getting Greenland. I mean, it's an inevitability. In the next 10 years, we're going to need it because I don't think Europe could reverse its decline, but it is in steep decline right now. And when people are like, oh, America's acting like an empire decline. Okay, even if we're an empire decline, what the fuck does that make Europe? Europe is in terms of like its ability to defend itself and its ability to have functioning economies and its ability to keep internal peace in a way. I mean, even the immigrant problem, we're having a huge immigrant problem there, but it's like there is worse. Even if their demographics are better, but there's zero assimilation at all. And they see themselves as a completely foreign population. They don't even assimilate to the kind of slop mass American culture that America has, which, there's problems with that, but at least, keeps them relatively content or seeming that there's some sort of American. Europe doesn't have that. So Europe has a lot more problems than we do. They have some advantages, better demographics, better sense of who they are. But, when their economies are crumbling, they have no ability to defend themselves, and the entire world can walk all over them, that's very serious problems. So if we're in decline, that doesn't mean that Europe's going to rise from the ashes and be this all-powerful empire. No, it means that they're just going to have to transfer one imperial overlord for another, and that imperial overlord might be a lot worse. Actually, it will be a lot worse with China. So, I think that's a possibility. It's for both America and Europe's own good that they aren't driven into the arms of China. But that's why we need to go about this different. But I don't know if it's going to go about it different. I mean, Trump might focus on something else after in February or something. So this might be it. But I think Europeans are going to... They really, ever since Trump was elected, they've been wanting to reassess the relationship with America, which is funny that like Biden was humiliating them as well. But then they were like, we're going to be even more loyal to you. Oh, thanks for blowing up our pipeline. We're actually going to blame Russia for this, even though it was clearly you. America blowing up its pipeline was more embarrassing and more humiliating from Europe. And when Europeans were faced with that, because it agreed with their idiotic stance towards Ukraine, they were all like, "Thank you. We're going to blame Russia, and we're going to shut down any conspiracy theories that say this might be of America responsible in this." So Biden started the humiliation for them. I mean, but they were happy and gleeful for it. But when it's like Trump, they're now have this false posture of defiance that they would immediately cave to. But I think even if you get Greenland out of these strong arm tactics, it's not really worth it. You don't want to fully abuse. Europe, and Europe they've all been talking about transitioning away from America, and if they start to do so, they're just going to go into the arms of China, which is not good for us or them. So it's a messy situation. I still think the best solution, because in the next 10 years, I don't think Europe can really defend and retain Greenland. I think that they're going to allow more Chinese influence into that territory. And so it's better to have this referendum now before China gets a foothold there, rather than in 10 years when China's there and then they agree to do some type of COFA type agreement with China rather than us. And that's very much, in the next 10 years, Greenland is likely not going to be part of Denmark. And the longer it waits, the greater the likelihood it is that it falls within the China sphere of influence rather than ours. So it's better to do this now, but we have to go about it smart. And I do worry it's like maybe too late to do it in the smart way, but I still stand by it's worthwhile to get Greenland. I think the thing is, it's like Europeans aren't capable of defending faraway territories, and they're not utilizing it. It's outside the EU. It's outside the EU, but it's still, the projects we do there are still subject to EU regulations, which is why we've been paring down projects there. And it's why we've been wanting to renegotiate this. It's been a part of the renegotiations that are going on with Europeans, but it is there. So we want a pleasant solution to this. I mean, either COFA or some type of greater freedom of, and that those EU regulations that your American project has been subject to are removed. Maybe it's nominally in Danish hands, but it's basically a COFA in all but name. There could be something like that. I don't know. Those are probably the two best solutions. I think outright annexation would be cool. I mean, it's like, wow, we've now got Greenland, but it's going to cause internal problems here. Most Americans aren't going to be happy with it. They'll probably forget. It's not going to be a midterm issue but the price tag of it might be. It's also going to lead to issues with, also the Greenlanders don't want outright annexation, so it's not going to look good. It's going to look really bad on the world stage, and all the Greenlanders are going to then want to have and declare independence from us, which I don't know if it's going to be good for that, but it would be cool. But I think the better solutions is, best is COFA, second is some COFA in all but name, but it remains in Danish hands. But we need something that Trump can declare a win and that he has gotten Greenland. And I think COFA offers that, and everyone goes home relatively happy. So that is my take on the Greenland crisis. We will continue to cover it as more news updates happen, but we'll go into this conservative campus culture article for a little bit. I'll probably just talk about it for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll get to the other questions. I think it was a fascinating article. I've talked about this a lot. I talked about this a few weeks ago where Manhattan Institute and City Journal interviewed all these young Zoomers and their political beliefs. And I had a whole podcast about it on what it shows the state of Gen Z conservatism. And this article further reinforces my notions, is that a lot of Zoomers, they're getting more of these far-right ideas than ever before, but they're not as ideological as you think. They are not all turning into far-right identitarians who are fully committed to these ideas. A lot of them view this as entertainment. A lot of them have a type of, spurious maybe attitude towards politics, but, it's not deeply serious. These are not hardened militants. There are a number of ideological aligned kids, but they are a small minority among young conservatives. Now, the Manhattan Institute one just interviewed random young Republicans, and most of them were out of college. The New York Magazine article is primarily interviewing campus conservatives, so they're at college. These are more politically engaged types. These are more than just Republican voters. So these are the most engaged people, young people. But even there, that picture is reinforced because they're showing a difference between two different cultures that are happening in college campuses. There's now two groups. It's like Turning Point USA, which is more of a fun social scene, focused primarily on campus politics, like what's going on campus and dealing with university issues. Sometimes when it's election season, they get them involved in local campaigns and that. But they're not really fully politically serious. It is like conservative campus culture, but it's not meant to be like dead serious militant. if you're really like political ideologue, you're now hilariously enough in the college Republicans at a lot of these campuses. Sometimes it's different at a lot of universities, but I talked to some people about this, to get a better picture, and they're like saying, yeah, that's mostly the correct because it's allowing college Republicans to be the more hardcore element. And they emphasize this in the article because they go to Clemson, and Turning Point USA is like all about social issue or campus social issues and that stuff. And the college Republicans there complain that they're about frivolous issues. Meanwhile, the college Republicans are like dead serious about like demographic change, and all the hard right, online right issues that they're into, and they're like dead serious about this. Which is very different from my area, because in my area, first off, there was a ton of different conservative groups. There was no TPUSA at the time. Like Charlie Kirk, I think created TPUSA when I got out of college or like my senior year, but it was not coming about on college campus at all. And TPUSA was like very different beast back then. I remember when he did an interview with the Daily Caller, this is like 2014, I wasn't even aware of him. And he was like always emphasizing it's a nonpartisan group just dedicated to spreading free market principles to college campuses, which, is a funny way of thinking about it. But that was his point. It was not the type of organization that it's seen as today, but it transformed itself during the Trump years, and it became the only conservative campus group. A lot of the things that were around when I was there, Young Americans for Liberty, I think, is still around, but it's very tiny, and it's clearly not addressed to the right wing issues. And people really don't talk about y'all that much. Young Americans for Freedom transformed to Young Americans Foundation. It's not really around at all. I think they just focus on I think they still give money out to campus speakers. I remember they were the rival of TPUSA when Groyper War broke out. YAF was trying to position itself as a more serious alternative to TPUSA's party vibe. TPUSA won, and YAF, those people then went into TPUSA or got basically caught up by TPUSA. It's even like any other campus organization. Our conservative groups are that are dedicated toward campus. Pretty much everything they do now is with TPUSA. Like Leadership Institute had a lot more like political ideological groups. Youth for Western Civilization that I was a part of was under the umbrella of Leadership Institute. So was y'all and a couple of others. I think there's Students for Liberty, which is like really left wing, but these are very minor groups. You really just have TPUSA and college Republicans. But now college Republicans at my time were just complete Republican apparatchiks. These guys were like more moderate than Paul Ryan. They're like, we need to focus on like votes. We shouldn't talk about any controversial issue besides taxes. And all these guys were just like hoping to like be some functionary in the state party. And it's like boring, sucks. They were all anti-Trump in 2016 and even into 2020. College Republicans would suck. But college Republicans, due to the fact that they don't have a top-down organization, it's just the college Republicans there. They have some affiliation with a party, but there's no real central control over college Republican chapters. So they're much easier to just take over and operate as you see fit. And that was also the case with some of these YWC chapters in the early 2010s, is that some of them would just take over the college Republicans, kick out the cucks, and then they run it as they saw fit. And even if it would just be a YWC chapter in all but name. So Youth for Western Civilization. So that would be the case there. But now that's happened all over the country, is that college Republicans have got really hardcore right wing. You saw that with the CR group chats leaks. And now for people who think that TPUSA is too frivolous, they're now joining up with college Republicans. And that is a difference. That's a big difference from my time and any other time, is that now college Republicans is a hardcore group. But it does show like the change in campus conservatism. Is like TPUSA, it might be, I guess, the more moderate branch, but it's still further to the right than any other than all campus groups, with the exception of YWC, which was tiny. It only had like maybe 50 members nationwide. Except with the exception of that, it's to the right of any campus group that when I was around in the early 2010s, or even it's to the right of itself in the late 2010s. But then the college Republicans are like way to the right than it was in the past. So, it seems a difference of demeanor and focus. And it's all, and TPUSA likes to attract a lot of girls. It has a party vibe. It's seen as something fun. While college Republicans are like dead serious, like we want to change the world. And maybe that's not as attractive to college students who really want to do something fun and not something dead serious. But it's like the really ideologically aligned kids who are fully getting into the online right stuff. And this is not full on entertainment or frivolous, or some of these people, like, they interview people who have very moderate views. Like, they interview this girl who's at Ole Miss, who is from New York, is a Micheling, and she's, in another time and place, she would have not fit in Ole Miss, but she has utilized her political stardom and her connection with being a TPUSA president to make herself fit in, or to be a big woman on campus at Ole Miss. And she even has problems with, with her own sorority. I had friends who were reading this and they were saying like, oh, the reason why that a lot of this conservative campus culture isn't fitting in with the Greek life is that they might be too prudish and trad for that. That's not the case with TPUSA. The real issue is that they're too wild and go against their standard norms. Because for Greek life is a conservative institution, but they generally don't get involved in political activism. One is that they're too busy having fun. Which even at one point in college, I was like, this seems a lot more. At one point I was like, I could focus on political stuff, which there wasn't really much going on in the early 2010s, or I can focus on my fraternity, and I chose fraternity over that, probably for the best actually. And that's like the case with that. They're just too focused on fun. Second, it's like just seen as weird thing to do. It's like, well, why are you doing anything political? We got a party to have. And then it's like same with the sorority girls, is that they're obsessed with these standards and norms. And this girl is always called, who's running the TPUSA chapter at Ole Miss, is always called before standards, sometimes being for too wild, but it's also the fact that she's just too loud and vocal and into something that they associate as not being standard sorority behavior or what a sorority girl should be into. And I think that's also the case with a lot of these universities, is that Greek life is very conservative, very big Trump supporters, but their main thing is like, don't rock the boat. It's focus on social activities, and that's it. They like TPUSA because it's a fun social activity, it's focused on campus issues, and it's not really focused on, there's no dead serious political element to a lot of these chapters. So they'll like go occasionally to these events, but it still even goes a lot along with that. So if you're looking for Greek life, and this is explained in this article and a lot of other articles about Greek life, is that you're not going to turn them into political activists. One, their life is just too good. They've got a lot of other things going on. This is also the problem with conservatives in general, is that our people have too many things going on. They've got jobs, they've got families. They're not going to focus on political activism, and maybe their life is good. And it's even more obvious when it comes to Greek life, because Greek life, they're partying, they're having an amazing time. They don't have time to worry about political issues. So the guys in like college Republicans and stuff, they're even at these southern campuses, because they primarily go to Clemson and Ole Miss to interview people. The people in like college Republicans, they're really far out from Greek life, because they're really interested in the stuff. But that's not to say that like these guys in Greek life and TPUSA aren't getting these ideas. They're much more critical of Israel than they would have been in the past and other things, but they're focused on a lot of other things, and they're not really ideological whatsoever. And that's indicated by this girl at the TPUSA chapter, is that she emphasizes that we don't talk about abortion. We don't talk about anything that's going to make people too uncomfortable, which is like a huge difference from campus conservatism in the past, where like abortion was one of the big issues for them. And now like they don't talk about it because, well, I think it's also something that even a lot of our side doesn't want to admit, is that America's far more pro-abortion than it's ever been. And that's especially the case with young people, especially with young women. They might be opposed to abortion in the abstract, but when it becomes a real issue, like when the Supreme Court struck it down, then they all become pro-abortion. So they don't talk about it, but this woman, and she has a lot of other, she's not even that strong on immigration, but she's into conspiracy theories. She even hints that she believes conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk's death. And then she's like, who's her favorite person to watch? She's like, oh, I really like watching Nick Fuentes now. And you're like, I don't think you're getting the politics, but I think it shows that, like, for a lot of these guys, this is a form of entertainment. And which makes it both a success is that if it's entertaining and fun and people laugh at, you get more people. But at the same time, you shouldn't take in the fact that people are watching influencers like that and hearing these ideas through TikTok and elsewhere, that this is dramatically changing who they are or setting their ideology. As it's much less ideological than you'd expect for these groups. It's about fun, but there are deeply ideological groups, and they're now taking over college Republicans, which that might be the forces that then take over the Republican Party. But that is a minority even among campus conservatives. So I think the one thing, even with Gen Z conservatives, is a point I want to make, is that yes, they're getting a lot of these ideas, more right-wing ideas than they have ever had in the past. The influencers they're watching are more right-wing, but then that goes along with, contradictory impulses that, the vast majority of Gen Zers, and this is even the case with Gen Z Republicans, aren't fond of the immigration or aren't fond of the immigration moves, not because they're not deporting enough people, but because they think they're deporting too many people. Yes, they're critical of Israel. That's true. That's one thing, but it's in some ways agreeing with, well, I don't actually, I'm not going to make that point, because I think even the far right people make a lot of the same points that the far left makes on it. So that could be a case of it. But even a lot of other, I don't even think there's like a desire to have, they might be laughing more at racist jokes and other things. I don't think this is also a sign that they're eager for a separate white ethno state, which I don't even think that's the case. I even saw this like completely separate. I saw all these vets and troops who are on right-wing Twitter talking about all their mixed race kids and how it's awesome. And if anyone dares insult them, they're going to kill them. And this got a ton of engagement. So even on our side, I don't think that's really the case. I don't think it's encouraging support for a kind of typical white nationalism, but I think they're more okay with these type of jokes and rhetoric than they would have been in the past. It's more socially acceptable, but it doesn't really mean that they're being fully propagandized into it, is the way I would say that. So that is my take on that. Now we're going to go with the other questions. Okay, actually, we got two questions for New England refugees. Sorry about the thing. He said, his first question is, looks like James Tallarico will win the Democratic primary. How will this affect the race, and what do you think of him? I don't think he's ahead of Crockett right now, but a lot can change, and it's still a competitive race. Oh, that's just one poll showing him ahead. Other polls show Crockett ahead. I mean, they're older. Tallarico is the more competitive candidate. He's the only one who could win. Crockett can't win. That's why Republicans started this type of campaign to encourage her to run, where they're like, oh, you can win. Like, people really want you. And she got convinced of this, and that's why she's running. And if she's the nominee, Republicans will definitely win. I think Tallarico, it's going to be very tough for him to win, even if he is, but he is the most competitive candidate that they could field. And if he wins the nomination, that is going to make it a very competitive race, whatever Republicans run. If it's against Paxton, I think he would win. But I don't think Paxton's going to get the nomination. But I think if he's the nominee, Paxton loses, and this might jeopardize Republican control of the Senate. But if it's Hunt or Cornyn, he'll probably lose. But it'll be very tough. Even against Wesley Hunt, I think Cornyn would defeat him. But Hunt, I think Hunt would still pull it out, but it'd be really close. So that's my view on that, and it's very moderate. Even though people are like, he just destroyed his campaign by saying that all religions are equal. I'm like, dude, like the average American thinks this way. If you want to run on like he's a heretic, I don't think that's going to really do much for the voters. His other question is, you were talking about left and right wing films during One Battle After Another pod. This reminded me that there's the most key prestige television series out right now, Landman. No. I'm actually not going to read it because he's like talking about it. It is not a key. First off, it's not prestige TV because it's meant for like boomers. Like the Taylor Sheridan shows are not prestige TV. They have some of the high production values of prestige TV more than the network TV shows, but it's not prestige. And I don't like Taylor Sheridan shows. I'm not going to watch Landman. I've not seen enough clips of it, but I did not like Yellowstone. I'm not going to watch the newer version of Yellowstone with Landman. I mean, if you guys like it, that's fine, but I probably Taylor Sheridan shows are probably worth its own podcast. I would probably do that. I might watch a few episodes, but I really don't like it. I don't. But it's the thing is like it shows that how like unkeyed our base is, because we think of our base as like, oh, they're really socially conservative. They want their own white ethno state, and they're really hostile to immigrants and stuff. And then this show, it celebrates immigrants. It celebrates like that the whites stole the lands from the Indians. And then there's like this vulgar scene where Billy Bob Thornton's character is telling his daughter is like, well, you can't do anything but as long as it's not in you. It's like you can do all the things that are sexual, but not having basically having full on intercourse. And it's like a really vulgar scene, and you're like, I don't think this is like that based, and like our audiences love that. So it's worth watching like this stuff to realize like the what our base is actually like. It's not as based as we might think. I mean, it's still nice that they give entertainment that's dressed up in red state aesthetics, which it really is. It's just red state aesthetics. It hates the liberal bugmen with our college degrees and celebrates blue collar guys who are genuine and they're rough around the edges. And it creates that's like the new right wing red state style. I'm not really into that style, and it's also when it's paired with, they'll complain about like using pronouns, but then they'll celebrate immigrants and how whites stole the lands from the Indians. And even like Yellowstone had a really bad ending where the whites like sacrificed their own land and handed over to the Indians. But then they maintained their gravestones, and so it's like we give up our land, but hopefully the Indians will maintain our cemeteries. So no, I'm not going to praise Landman. Dollar Bill had a question saying, does Will Stancil have a shot at becoming the governor of Minnesota if he decides to throw his hat in the ring? No. It'd be really funny, though. He's run for office before, and he's lost every time by a lot. So, no, he's not. He's too much of a goofball. A lot of left-wingers now unironically like him because he's falling around ice. And even though there's some leftists who are making fun of him, they're like, he's got more bravery than anyone else. So we respect Will Stancil. But Stancil is... he has no charisma. I mean, the reason why he's become a meme is he's such a goofball and like this dorky guy. There is no way on earth he would ever become governor of Minnesota. But it would be very funny if he decided to run for governor of Minnesota. So I support him throwing his hat in the ring, but he would absolutely not win. So we got some more questions. Obviously, we've got... questions from Sharecrop. He said, I agree that the Republican base can be pretty stupid. What percentage of the current base do you think are anti-Trump Epstein conspiracy types? I wonder if there are people who would be anti-corporation or anti-military industrial complex 20 years ago. Anti-Trump conspiracy theory types? I don't even know if they're even voters. Maybe 5%. He's got 92% approval rating among Republicans, and a lot of those Republicans are not because he hasn't arrested every single Jew who was involved in Epstein. It's because they think he's too radical. I would say at most 5%, and it's probably less. And a lot of those people, I don't know. You don't know. A lot of those people probably are leftists who moved over, or like people who are really hardcore into Alex Jones for years. We've always kind of had those conspiracy nuts, but now that content's a lot more popular online. The thing is, like, that 5% is a small percentage of voters, but they're very online, so they have overstated presence online compared to normies. So we think that they're a much bigger part of the base, but I'd say at most 5%. And he's also, do you think Pam Bondi is doing an accurate job? Do you think it's good that she seems to exist entirely offline? I don't think she would be a good job. I mean, Trump is really pissed off at her. He's likely to get rid of Bondi because He thinks she's not arresting enough people. The issue is that they'll probably get an interim AG, which is going to be the plan, but that interim AG is not going to be able to do what Trump wants to do, and he's still going to face the same problems that he has with Bondi, and it might even be a dumber person who's like worse on TV. I mean, you could say like Bondi who do better, but Bondi's like trying her hardest to do what Trump wants, far more than anybody would have had in his first term, and it's not enough because, like, you know, it's the issues with our system. Our system is not designed to just like arrest people because, you know, the president doesn't like them. You know, they have to build a case, grand juries throw them out, or the lawyers working on them think they're weak cases and they replace people. They're going to still have the same problems if Bondi is removed. You're not going to suddenly see like every leftist arrested throughout the country if Bondi is removed. So there's a question similar to that on Gallup. I'll go to Gillis and Jordan because he's got the next topic I want to cover. He said, his second question, which I'll start first, he said, I recently saw two conflicting polls, both from fairly reputable sources on Trump's support among Republicans. Gallup says Republican identification is down 6 points from last year, and that the backlash is much worse than the first term. Wall Street Journal says 92% of his 2024 voters strongly approve of his term so far. Which do you think is actually the case? Personally, I think anyone who thinks he's weaker now than in 2016 is delusional, even though the honeymoon is clearly over. Yeah, I think it's Gallup's accurate. I think Republican identification probably is true. Is that there was a lot of young people who were Republicans last year are now not Republicans. Because they think he's too mean on the deportations and other issues. There's been enough. I think there's a lot of new voters who came in suddenly over 2024 for a variety of reasons that they've now moved away from Republicans. But the backlash, so that's a more obvious backlash. But the thing is Trump had a much bigger victory in 2024 compared to what he did in 2016. 2016 is almost an accident he won. It's not almost an accident. It is an accident he won. 2024, he was obviously going to win, and he won the popular vote. So he had a lot more voters, and I think a lot more of those voters have soured on him. The issue with 2016 is those voters were already like reluctant Trump voters, and they went with Trump. I think they were more confident Trump voters. There was a lot more people who were willing to cast their ballot and much more confident in it. And I think that's reflected in his control over the Republican Party. So I think the backlash, among voters, it's probably about the same, but I think he has much more. He has a lot more advantages this time. One, he has far greater control over the Republican Party than he did in 2017. Media's far weaker and has far less influence in riling people up. A lot of people, there are now protests over ICE. It does seem we're moving a little bit more back to the 2010s, but there's not the accompanying hysteria. There is nowhere near the level of censorship and just the feeling that the left has complete cultural and social control like it did. And the media is still a lot more toned down than it was in 2017. So there's that. So there's not as much. The public backlash, I think, with maybe approval of polls, but I think when it comes to cultural and social backlash, it's far weaker. And I think he has greater control over Republicans, and Republicans are much more pro-Trump and much more vocal in it than they were in 2017. So I think it's that a lot of the new voters who came voted for him in 2024 have now soured on him. But he had far more voters in 2024 than he did in 2016. So there's that. But so it's two different things that are being assessed here. But he's far stronger than he was in 2017. But it's maybe not as strongly reflected in. It's harder to poll that because it's a cultural and social attitudes. There's far less of opposition towards him than now. He's doing things that are far more radical. He was doing nothing in 2017 that was radical except for these tweets. And his tweets now are far more outrageous. But you have to remember is that in 2017, he got the entire NFL to kneel in protest of him just because he criticized the kneelers. Now he's like, imposing tariffs on Europe by tweet, saying Somalis are garbage, and all this stuff that would have never been possible under the first term. And, there's not as much cultural and social backlash. I mean, that is changing a little bit. Somebody has a question, I think, about polarization, which we'll go to next, but I got to go to this question on the church invasion in Minnesota. Do you think that this will backfire on the left optics-wise, and do you think the DOJ will prosecute Don Lemon along with the rest of the group? I mean, they want to prosecute them. I don't know if they'll prosecute Don Lemon. Trump would love that because it's like somebody recognizes and the idea that, and he sees this as an enemy, and he would love to press charges against Don Lemon. I mean, disturbing the peace, they've got a lot of things that they, intruding on private property. There's a lot of things that they could charge him with. And they could have a civil rights violation because this is, they're interfering with their expression of religion, which I think that the DOJ would try to charge them with. I think they'll try to do charges. They want to make an example of these protesters. They've always been trying to make examples of these protesters. People think that they're not arresting anyone. The fact is that they press charges against Democratic candidates and lawmakers who interfere with ICE business. And if you're going to go and break into a church and cause a ruckus, they're going to definitely try to press charges with them. No, it's really bad optics, but I don't think the left cares about it, and it's only going to be something with conservative media. I think it's just going to encourage greater polarization on the issue, which is good, because I think we need to maintain high Republican support for ICE's actions and to really place the blame for anything going on with ICE with insane leftists who are trying to interfere with their business of arresting dangerous illegal criminals. So I think it'll backfire on that result because it's going to make it a lot harder for the left to win over Republican voters when they're doing shit like this. And so I think it'll be in our interest. And I think it's a lot different than to say the family separation stuff of 2018, which was far less radical than what Trump's doing now. And Republicans all got cold feet over it. I think, thankfully, to the left, as the left is extreme, it'll ensure those people stay supporting Trump's agenda. So James had some questions that are similar. He said, do you think the deployment of... he had something. He said, do you think the deployment of Federal Prison Bureau officers in Minnesota will help? It's probably the best option other than using troops. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think... deploying any officers, I think deploying law enforcement is probably a little bit better than National Guard. I mean, it's good optics. I mean, they're talking about sending in federal troops, but a lot of these National Guard are not trained to do any of this shit. And this happened a lot during the riots, is that they were kind of stood around and didn't know what to do. And it's even had that cases with, in D.C., they didn't know what to do. It's in Halloween, all these black kids attacked them and they weren't really quite sure what to do. But when you're sending in law enforcement, they're fully trained to do with this stuff and they really know how to put down the riots. So, I think it's a great option. The issue is that there's not enough of them to deploy. They had gotten normal jobs, so it's better to use the troops. But I think more federal personnel they send there is great, so I support that. His second question is, have you thought about doing an IQ supplement on the Duke's lacrosse scandal? This March will mark its 20th anniversary. Yes, I will do something on the 20th anniversary. Thanks. That is a great suggestion. So I'll try to do something this spring on the Duke lacrosse scandal. People are paying attention to it because it's the origin of Stephen Miller. It's also the origin of Richard Spencer as well. So we will discuss the Duke lacrosse case. I'll try to do an IQ supplement on it. So we got, and those two questions I don't know if I named before was Gillis and Joyer. Pay-per-view. There was another questions that were more aligned. I'll get to pay-per-view in a sec. Well, maybe not. Well, I'll have to go through some others. So we'll go with pay-per-view. He said, he's got two questions. If with the Somali fraud being exposed, I think an achievable goal is getting average boomer con to have the politics of Randy Fine. I don't think you want them to have the politics of Randy Fine. Similar to him, they are probably immovable on the Israel foreign policy issue, but they have really gotten pissed off with the fraud from Somalis and can get pushed into wanting to pause all immigration. Thoughts? Randy Fine has insane views on foreign policy that is not the average boomer. I mean, the average boomer supports Israel, but like Randy Fine is just in another place. And he sometimes does this extreme domestic stuff because he knows it, like it's what Trump wants. It's like he's the one who introduced the annexation of Greenland idea, and he does this stuff in order to curry favor with MAGA and Trump, so he can focus on his insane foreign policy. I don't think you don't want them to have the politics of Randy Fine, because then their chief issue is Israel, which it's not of boomers, and everything else is secondary. And Randy Fine just adopting this stuff because he thinks it's the best way to encourage support for Israel. So he's a little bit all over the place. But I think it's good. Outside of Randy Fine, yes, I think we can get the average boomer to really hate immigrants and other things or not hate immigrants. We don't hate anyone, but to hate mass immigration and to want these people deported is by exposing the fraud. And I think if you've watched Fox News over December, they were really making their audience view all Somalis as parasites who don't belong in the United States. So a lot of them are moving in that position, and you can see that from the type of media they're consuming. So, yes, I think you can get them to be a lot better on immigration. They're still going to have weaknesses on Israel and foreign policy, but they're going to be a lot better on domestic issues. The second question is, what do you make of Charlie Kirk becoming a meme less than 6 months since he assassinated? His legacy is AI memes with George Floyd, getting confused with Christian Kirk by Stephen A. Smith, and that stupid fucking song, We Are Charlie Kirk. It's just kind of natural. It's a part of the internet because the internet likes to be iconoclastic, and it likes these type of offensive memes. It's like how like Jeffrey Epstein is now a meme. It's like how George Floyd is now a meme. We kind of like to take our sacred cows and turn them into funny memes for us to laugh at. It's a very much part of the internet culture. And then they had like Charlie Kirk like catching footballs with like him getting confused by Christian Kirk. It was really funny. So it's just a natural part of how Charlie Kirk has become. You aren't going to maintain the type of reverent attitude towards Charlie Kirk over time. I mean, he still has that among right-wingers and a martyr figure, but I think it's changing over time. And it's also how the right is debating Charlie Kirk. You're either debating whether Israel killed him or Sumerian demons killed him because he's a time traveler, or, you're making him out to be this martyr who was killed by the left. And so the right's debating about it, but it's just very different how Charlie Kirk is treated now than it was in September. I mean, if any liberal dared make an irreverent comment towards Kirk, that person faced a lot of consequences. Now, there's a lot of irreverence towards it, but I mean, it's well-meaning irreverence. I think it's not, attacking him or condemning him, but it's becoming more of a humorous figure in death. Some of the memes aren't very good. Like the ones with like him and Renee Good is like, your shooting was wrong and so was your shooting. I guarantee you Renee Good thought that like Charlie Kirk got what he had was coming. And if Charlie Kirk was alive today, he would obviously defend the ICE agent in him acting in self-defense towards Renee Good. But it's just the nature of the internet. It's how the internet is. It's a very irreverent place. It likes these type of memes. It types of like the edgy, controversial humor. That's why a lot of right-wing influencers are getting big on TikTok with like outrageous rants. It's very entertaining for people. Ken's got 2 questions. He said, thoughts on Kevin Deanna? Great guy. I've known him for years. Started YWC. Great guy. Don't fully agree with all his takes, but he's a great guy. So I've known him for years. So, friend. That's mainly the thoughts. Great guy. So that's it. Has some good tweets, have some maybe not so good tweets, but nobody's perfect. A second question, have you seen the new 28 Years Later movies? I have not. Ken says the new one, Bone Temple, is much better than the 20 Years Later. I was not aware that there are 2 separate movies. I had a vague awareness that 28 Years Later came out, and then I see a sequel, and I'm like, are these the same movie? Is this the new? But I haven't seen them, so I have no thoughts. I haven't seen any of the 28 movies, 28 timeline movies in a while. I remember watching 28 Days Later. I guess it was 28 Weeks Later, years ago, but I don't have any strong thoughts on it. Maybe a podcast, but I don't know if I do something on that. But maybe. I think we're just down to K Max and LK Rurik. Let me double check to ensure. Oh, no. I know who we got. We got Mark. Mark is a new guy. His questions didn't pop up for some reason. He's got two questions. He says, "You've always said that the America of the 1980s and 1990s can't come back due to demographic change. I take that I agree with. Is it possible that with sufficient right-wing policies that a 2000s early 2010s style America still exists? Seems like the country was so much saner and less polarized. And we cannot return to the past. So I don't like situating these things that like we're returning to an earlier age. It's very politically common for us for nostalgia to be a powerful force in our society. I think it's a much more powerful force in our society than any time because you have ease of access to the past in a way that you didn't 30 years ago. As I made this point, is that you can go onto YouTube and watch all these clips from the 80s and 90s. Like, wow, it seems so much better. But it's grass is always greener on the other side. You can never return the past, and I don't like situating these things in the past. So I don't like that framing of it. He has a question about depolarization, which we'll go into more. That's a more interest. I don't want to say it's more interest, but it's something we can work with a little bit more. He said, "I feel like this goes in cycles. The U.S. was a uniparty in the 1950s and early 1960s. During the mid-60s to early 70s, it was as bad as today. More depolarized again from the 80s to Obama. Second term, more polarized again. Will it take total right-wing cultural victory to move the country to the right?" Well, it was actually not as depolarized in the 60s and 70s as you would think. Is that generally the silent majority was true. Is that the political consensus in our country of the mainstream was set. It's why the country was able to get whipped up into believing Watergate was a real thing. Is that there was this strong consensus within the country. And so it wasn't really that polarized as you think. Now, it was more on the extreme elements where it's very polarized. You had the campus leftists, you had the Black Power movement, you still had the Klan around, but it wasn't as polarized as people would think. And the way our legislators worked, and the way our electoral politics worked, it wasn't that polarized. It's become more polarized in mainstream politics, in the way our legislature works, the way our White House works, the way the actual structure of politics since Newt Gingrich, the Contract of America in 1994, Bill Clinton's election, early 90s. It's become more polarized, and we're far more polarized than we've been probably, even though it's like a very different situation from the Civil War, but we're not nearly as polarized then. And he said, would it take total right-wing cultural victory to move the country to right? No, I mean, we've moved the country to right, or at least to accepting a lot of our beliefs far more than we did in the 2010s. And look at what Trump's been able to do this term. Even though people think he's doing nothing, he's doing a hell of a lot in his first term when he did like nothing in his first term, because we were beholden to this immense left-wing cultural power. The issue is that a lot of voters, they prefer status quo. They don't like to rock the boat, and Trump is rocking the boat a lot, and that makes them queasy and uncomfortable, and they just want to return to status quo. No rocking of the boat. And a lot of voters are like that, and due to the nature of America, where there's a high quality of life, you can find contentment here, and prosperity is that people don't want to move to a direction that they view as too crazy and chaotic. But we have moved, I don't know if to the right, but we've moved them to the center. And it's something moving to a new direction that in some ways is better than the early 2010s. Like, I don't know if you want to return to the early 2010s. I mean, Obama he got a second term in the early 2010s. Woke was starting to build up at that time. Trayvon Martin became a thing. And the tech sphere and social media was like, even though it wasn't less political, it was still conformed to left-wing dictates. So I don't know if you really want to return to that time. Yes, it's saner and less polarized, but even today, among normies, they're less hyper politicized than they were 4 or 5 years ago. That might be changing a little bit with the ICE protest, but I think it's just that people who are very politically engaged are now even more polarized than they've ever been, while the center is just kind of, much more content and much more, are less focused on politics than they were in the 2010s and early 2020s, which is for the right's benefit. So those are the questions now for LK Rourke, or not LK Rourke. We got to go to K-Max. K-Max sent something about the outing that Fuentes and Andrew Tate and Clavicular all went out on, which that's all that Twitter has been talking about for a while. And he said, will your book be discussing the personality and performative nature of some in the alt-right? This is a little bit different in the personality and performative nature. What that was, I thought it was just like humorous content. It was bizarre, but people were really worked up about it. If it's a political thing, it's like really idiotic. But like for everyone else besides Fuentes, they're all entertainers and who went out. And it's not surprising they're going to do transgressive entertainment there. And it's also bizarre that like only like 3 of them are white. So, who are in the outing. So it is what it is. Some of these people I find funny. Like I find Clavicular and Andrew Tate funny. I don't fully approve of anything of Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate sometimes has interesting thoughts. Sneeko, not a fan of, but whatever. They're entertainers. So this is what they do. This is something very different from the performative nature of the online right and what I discussed in the alt-right. Because what a lot of those guys, they got online, and this is something different because this is just something that they're doing something for entertainment and doing something for clicks at a club. It's an attention gaining thing. So it's a little bit different with the the performative nature that I would talk about with the alt-right, where these guys would just like imagine that they are Nazis and it's like 1932 Germany and like this type of fantastical view of politics that's completely disconnected from what the real world around them. I do discuss that a bit, but I don't really go too much in the personality types and the like drama. I try to stay above the drama and depersonalize it and just describe the story as is, because there's a lot of tawdry dirt and stuff, and I try to not be, it's not a gossip book. There is a really funny gossip book with Black Pill, the Ellie Reeve book, which is a really funny book. I liked it. Some people really didn't like it, but there's so much funny scandal mongering in it and like really describing how pathetic a lot of these people are. But that's not my book. My book stays on a higher plane, so to speak. So we do talk about the performative nature, but that's very different from the Miami club outing of these influencers. It's a completely different thing. So I think that leaves us, I'm going to do a double check for our good friend LK Rourke. So yeah, I think that's just for LK Rourke. If I somehow missed you, hit me, harass me, and I will get to you on Wednesday. For some reason, me with the leading the Crescent paired it back, but we've got a question from him. He said, Scott, last week I got into an unfortunate auto mishap where the other party were Mexicans. I'm unharmed, but my car is foobarred. Can you give a PSA about the scourge of Mexicans behind the wheel? Oh, all minorities behind the wheel are dangerous. You always have to worry. It's like if you see this, like the vehicle, and you look behind you and like, who's driving the car? And it's like, oh, it's a white male. And like, okay, it's fine. But like anything beyond a white male, you have to worry about it. It's like, it's a white female. You're like, they're too cautious. They don't know what to do. Asian drivers are like that. They don't know, like, I don't know what to do. A lot of black drivers are very risky, will do stuff. I got into a lot of accidents in college from like black drivers. They're just not paying attention, full attention. They'll just run a stop sign. And so that's the same with I think a lot of immigrants is that, it takes a lot of time to learn the standards of American driving. And a lot of these guys that they're full on immigrants, they don't understand the nature of American driving, and in the third world, driving is very dangerous. It was very dangerous when we first had it here, because we didn't have like all the safety precautions and established norms with it. And so there'd always be kids getting run over, car accidents were really bad. But we've changed that over time. But with a lot of these immigrants who are coming from the third world, they are not with these standards. They drive drunk. They refuse to follow the law. So yes, it's you have to deal with that on the road. They're much more present more of a danger on the road, and we're seeing that also with these immigrant truck drivers, that they don't follow the rules of the road like native-born truck drivers do. So, yes, you got to watch out with immigrants behind the wheel, because they're not going to follow the same standards that we do. It takes a lot of time, and growing up, driving around with their parents, seeing how they drive and their norms that they're following, letting people in and that stuff, and the way they drive, and that's placed down to you. But if you don't have that experience, you're going to be more of a danger on the road. So that is it for Highly Respected today. We're going to be back with more great content this week, so be on the lookout for that. So until next time, stay respected.